everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. The story of Jamaican music is well known and discussed and had a rich, deep and multi-layered history that's full of interesting and mind-blowing stories. Before reggae came into existence in Jamaica, there were traditional folk music types like mento and others, and then ska, which would explode in popularity after independence in 1962. Ska is technically the grandfather of reggae music and is a fusion of mento, calypso, and American jazz/R&B. Its frenetic-paced rhythm was indicative of the optimism that swept across Jamaica in the first few years of that island's self-rule, and would over time slow into the more mellow genre that became known as Rocksteady towards the end of the 1960s. And Rocksteady itself would also evolve into that drum and bass-led magic sound that we know today as reggae music, all thanks to Toots and the Maytals, who would identify that genre in their classic track Do the Reggae. Naturally, the question surrounding the origins of Rocksteady has been debated over the years, with several schools of thought giving credit to the likes of Alton Ellis, Derrick Morgan, or Roy Shirley as the first to play it. But in recent times, plenty of pointers have steadily focused on the amazing possibility that the first Rocksteady track was indeed performed by a visiting Shanghai-born singer named Cheng in 1967. The track he did, named Always Together, was recorded at Jamaica's leading production studio during his 2-week stay on the island and became an all-time Rocksteady classic that's celebrated worldwide until today. And these recent revelations has raised the pertinent question: was Cheng's Always Together truly the first Rocksteady song? And to get to the bottom of this musical riddle, we have to go back to its progenitor in ska. By the end of the 1950s, musicians and producers in Kingston had begun to record a sound that was a fusion of Caribbean music like mento and calypso with the type of R&B that Jamaicans were listening to on US radio stations that was being played by the likes of Pat Domino and Louis Jordan. Its emerging popularity would coincide with the mood of celebration in Jamaica as that island got its independence from Great Britain in 1962. Ska's upbeat and fast-paced structure simply reflected the mood on the island, as citizens of Jamaica expected freedom to come with economic prosperity and general progress in society. But after a few years, that mood of celebration and optimism had dwindled badly, and as is often the case, arts and culture is always reflective of how society is feeling. So instead of the large ensemble ska bands that typically had a guitarist, bass, drums, saxophone, trumpet, trombone, keyboards, and so on, that large group was replaced by a much smaller crew with little or no horn section, as the trombone, saxophone and all the likes were generally done away with, and the bands became more reliant simply on the drums and bass than guitar and keyboards. And most notably, the music became much slower and notably less ecstatic, and the energetic and wild dance moves were replaced with the more subdued strut that became the foundation of skanking as we know it today. Previous ska musicians like Alton Ellis and Derrick Morgan all began to experiment with this new sound, which by 1967 didn't yet have a name. It was around that period that a Chinese musician named Cheng would visit Jamaica and unknowingly make history. Cheng had been living in America after his family had been forced to leave their homeland for greener pastures. He'd been working as a journalist back home, but now in America he wanted to try something new, and he would totally ignore the typical Chinese immigrant path in those times, which often revolved around either opening a restaurant or a laundromat, and instead Cheng would explore his artistic side. He became a stage actor and singer, becoming quite notable in New York, and was cast in a number of Broadway shows and plays. He became well known and even performed on popular television shows like Ed Sullivan, and he became a massive hit, particularly with the Chinese community, and soon began to tour the West Indies, catering to Chinese immigrants in places like Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago, where he was given a permanent gig at a lounge in a major hotel. Eventually, his fame was spread to Jamaica, which had had a thriving Chinese community since the 19th century. So as the foundations of Rocksteady were being laid, a Jamaican-based non-governmental organization which was dedicated to charity and the preservation of Chinese culture, called the Chinese Benevolent Association, sponsored Chang on a 2-week visit to the island to play a couple of shows. And it just so happened that Jamaica's fledgling music culture and industry had a powerful Chinese-Jamaican backbone of sound system and record store owners, instrumentalists and producers. And on arrival, he would bond with a number of them, but it was with band leader and producer Baron Lee that a real bond would be built. He was not only the leader of one of Jamaica's biggest bands called Baron Lee and the Dragonaires, but was also the owner of one of its major studios called Dynamic Sounds. Baron Lee was a major fan of Chang's work and didn't have a hard time convincing the singer to come over to his studio and record a song that would wed his Mandarin crooning with what was the hottest sound cooking in Kingston streets. And the studio session was haphazard, with virtually no rehearsals, just an idea and two willing musical forces who were ready to rock. And the result of that collaboration became a song that was called Always Together, a song that featured Cheng's yodeling in his native language over a charming Rocksteady instrumental, masterfully delivered by Baron Lee and the Dragonaires. On paper, such a fusion would have been unworkable, but somehow it clicked and turned out to be a smashing idea. And after recording that song, Cheng went back to America, and Baron Lee would eventually release that single under his record label, Sunshine Records. It didn't cause any major ripples on the island's general music scene, but really captivated the Chinese Jamaican community upon release in April 1967, just a few weeks before the release of two songs that reggae music industry commentators and critics have almost sworn over the years to be the first Rocksteady tracks. And the first of these being Hopeton Lewis's Take It Easy, a track masterfully put together by genius Trinidadian guitarist Lynn Tate, and the second song being Tougher Than Tough by Derrick Morgan. These songs became smash hits that reached the top of the Jamaican single charts in that year. And by the time Alton Ellis released his classic track Rocksteady, a song that would formally identify that genre, the question of who performed the first Rocksteady track was limited to only a few names, and the experimental collaboration between Stephen Cheng and Baron Lee would never arise in any discussions for more than 5 decades. However, the record of Always Together remained a much adored collector's item among hardcore Jamaican music fans around the globe. It also remained on the playlists in many Rocksteady and ska parties, and the original records are said to be very valuable. Stephen Cheng would continue performing as a musician for a couple of years into the 1970s with his band Dragon Seeds, before quitting and becoming a music teacher at the New York University for more than 40 years, before passing away at the age of 91 in 2012. Up until he passed, he had no idea that the song he recorded with Baron Lee had achieved legendary cult status, at least with hardcore fans. Now let's go back to the question of whether Always Together was truly the first Rocksteady track. My research uncovered Ken Booth's The Train Is Coming from 1966 as the earliest Rocksteady track on record. But who knows if even deeper research might uncover an even more original pioneer. But all in all, Stephen Cheng's song is definitely among the first Rocksteady tracks ever recorded, and is for sure the first Rocksteady fusion in the history of that genre. So there you have it. Thank you for watching the video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, God bless.